Have you ever seen someone lose everything in a single moment, and then somehow, life finds a way to bring back hope through the most unexpected bond? That's what happened to Michael, a 32-year-old firefighter who lived for adventure, the outdoors, and running marathons every year with his beloved golden retriever, Cooper. Michael's life was full of movement, full of energy. He was the kind of man who was always the first to help anyone in need, always smiling, always pushing himself to be stronger. But one rainy evening everything changed. The station had just finished a long rescue call, and Michael decided to head home early to rest. The roads were slick, the sky was dark, and in one split second, a speeding car ran a red light and slammed into the driver's side of his truck. The impact was brutal, glass shattered everywhere, metal twisted, and Michael's body was thrown with such force that he lost consciousness instantly. Hours later, he woke up in a hospital bed, the sterile smell of antiseptic in the air, bright white lights glaring down at him, and the quiet hum of machines beside him. When he tried to move, nothing happened. Panic washed over him. He tried again, but his legs didn't respond. His heart raced as the doctor came in with a somber face and told him the news no one ever wants to hear. His spinal cord had been severely damaged, and while they couldn't say it was impossible, the chances of him ever walking again were very slim. Michael stared at the ceiling, his world crashing down. All the things he loved, the hikes, the runs, the long walks on the beach with Cooper, they felt stolen from him in an instant. When they finally released him to go home in a wheelchair, his house felt like a stranger's place. Every corner reminded him of the life he used to live. Cooper, who had been staying with a neighbor while Michael was in the hospital, was finally brought home. The moment the dog saw him, he ran straight to Michael, tail wagging, eyes bright with excitement. But then something incredible happened. Cooper stopped, stared at the wheelchair, and tilted his head as if sensing something was wrong. Michael, holding back tears, whispered, "Hey buddy, it's me." Cooper gently put his paws on Michael's lap and rested his head on his chest, staying still as if to say, "I'm here, I'm not going anywhere." In the days that followed, Michael fell into a deep depression. He barely ate, barely spoke. He couldn't even look outside without feeling like the world had left him behind. But Cooper refused to leave his side. He would bring him his slippers, nudge his hands to pet him, and every morning, Cooper would sit by the wheelchair, leash in his mouth, waiting, hoping Michael would go outside with him. At first Michael ignored him, but one morning, Cooper became more persistent, pawing at his lap, barking softly, nudging the leash into his hands, almost pleading, and something in Michael shifted. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was hope, but he agreed to at least go outside. Rolling himself slowly down the driveway with Cooper walking calmly beside him. That simple act of fresh air, feeling the sun on his face, was the first moment Michael didn't feel completely trapped, and it was all because Cooper wouldn't give up on him. Over the next few weeks, Cooper started doing more. He began gently pulling the wheelchair to help Michael move, guiding him around obstacles, even fetching water bottles or small items Michael dropped, almost as if he instinctively knew how to help. Michael's physical therapist visited twice a week, encouraging him to do small movements with his upper body to keep his strength up, but it was Cooper who gave him the motivation to try harder. The dog would sit nearby during therapy, watching intently. And when Michael managed even the smallest improvement, Cooper would wag his tail and lick his hands like he was celebrating every tiny victory. Late one night, as Michael lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what his life had become, Cooper jumped up on the bed and curled against him, and for the first time since the accident, Michael didn't cry himself to sleep. He closed his eyes with a small spark of hope, thinking, if he believes in me, maybe I can believe in me too. The next day, Michael made a promise to himself and to Cooper that he wouldn't give up, no matter how impossible it felt, because Cooper hadn't given up on him. The following weeks were some of the hardest Michael had ever faced. Every morning he woke up to the same reality, the same feeling of helplessness as he stared at his legs that refused to move. But Cooper was there, waiting patiently beside the bed, tail softly thumping on the floor, eyes filled with quiet determination, as if saying, "Get up, we've got work to do." It was strange how the presence of this golden retriever, who couldn't speak a single word, carried more encouragement than any doctor or therapist ever could. Michael began setting small goals, tiny steps toward recovery. Though everyone told him not to get his hopes up, he refused to stop trying, and it was all because of Cooper. They started with simple routines. Michael would transfer himself into the wheelchair every morning, and Cooper would nudge his shoes closer, then sit and wait for him to put them on. When Michael would go outside for fresh air, Cooper learned to position himself just behind the wheelchair, gently nudging it forward with his head if Michael got stuck on uneven ground. One afternoon, Michael decided to try something harder. He asked his physical therapist to bring the parallel bars to the house, a piece of equipment used for balance and retraining weak muscles. It was the first time he had tried to stand since the accident. His arms trembled as he gripped the bars, sweat forming on his forehead within seconds. His legs felt heavy like they were made of stone. And just as he thought he was going to collapse, Cooper suddenly barked, a loud sharp bark, then ran to his side and pressed his body firmly against Michael's legs, giving him an anchor. Something stable to lean on. That simple act gave Michael just enough balance to stand for 3 whole seconds before lowering himself back into the chair, breathless but smiling for the first time in weeks. "Good boy," he whispered, his voice cracking, and Cooper wagged his tail like he had just saved the world. After that breakthrough, Cooper started pushing him even more. Every day he would bring the leash, bark once, then look at the door, refusing to let Michael spend the entire day indoors. They began rolling through the neighborhood, slow at first, but soon they went further, past the park where Michael used to jog, past the coffee shop where he and Cooper would sit on Saturdays. It was bittersweet but also healing, because now instead of feeling like life was over, it felt like maybe, just maybe, it was changing into something new. The community began to notice them too. Neighbors would wave and say, "It's good to see you out here again," and kids would run up to pet Cooper, who always stayed calm and gentle, never pulling or running off, as if he knew he was on an important mission. One day, as they rolled past the park, a group of kids were playing soccer and accidentally kicked the ball too far. It landed near Michael's chair, and before he could react, Cooper grabbed the ball in his mouth and ran it back to the kid's tail, wagging proudly. The kids laughed and cheered, calling Cooper a hero, and for a moment, Michael felt like a normal part of the world again, not someone broken or forgotten. That night, when he got home, something shifted inside him. He realized he wasn't just existing anymore. He was living, and it was because Cooper was giving him a reason to. A few weeks later, the physical therapist suggested trying a new exercise, one that would require more effort but could strengthen Michael's core muscles and maybe, just maybe, prepare him for braces or even assisted walking someday. It sounded terrifying, but Michael agreed, and when the therapist set up the harness system, Cooper sat quietly by the corner, watching with his calm, steady gaze. The moment Michael lifted himself slightly with the harness, Cooper walked over and pressed his head against Michael's hand, as if saying, "I'm here, don't be afraid." It was exhausting. His arms burned, sweat dripped down his face, but for the first time, Michael felt his right foot twitch, just a tiny movement, almost nothing, but enough to make the therapist gasp. Michael froze, then laughed in disbelief, and Cooper barked once, wagging his tail furiously like he understood the miracle they had just witnessed. Later that evening, when Michael sat in his wheelchair staring at his leg and all, Cooper gently laid his head on Michael's knee, looking up with those soulful brown eyes. And in that moment, Michael realized something powerful. It wasn't just about him learning to walk again, it was about learning to live again. Learning to hope again, learning that even in the darkest moments, love has the power to move mountains. From that day forward, Michael and Cooper had a new routine. Every morning they trained a little more, stood a little longer, stretched a little further, and with each passing week, the flickers of strength in Michael's legs grew small but undeniable, and it was clear to everyone who saw them that this dog was doing something no medicine or therapy could ever do. He was giving Michael the will to believe in himself again. Weeks turned into months, and what started as tiny flickers of movement in Michael's legs began evolving into something even the doctors couldn't explain. Every day Cooper woke him up the same way, gently pawing at the blanket, then sitting patiently until Michael rolled himself to the edge of the bed, and instead of feeling dread, Michael felt determination, because he wasn't doing it alone, he was doing it with his best friend. His home turned into a little rehab center. The living room now had resistance bands, therapy mats, and parallel bars set up near the window. Michael worked harder than ever, but what truly made the difference was how Cooper instinctively became part of the process. When Michael stretched his legs, Cooper would gently hold down the therapy mat with his paws so it wouldn't slip. When Michael tried the sit-to-stand exercises, Cooper would stand close by, leaning his weight against Michael's shin so he wouldn't topple. It wasn't just physical help, it was emotional too, because every time Michael wanted to quit, Cooper would tilt his head, give that soft little whine. And it felt like he was saying, "We're not stopping now, not when we've come this far." Soon, their story began spreading quietly in the neighborhood. The mailman would stop and ask, "How's Cooper helping today?" And the lady at the park always left an extra treat for him when they passed by. It was like the whole community was rooting for them. One afternoon, Michael's sister, Anna, came to visit. She hadn't seen him since the accident, and she froze in the doorway when she saw him at the bars. He was standing, not fully on his own, but upright, with sweat on his brow and a shaky smile on his face. How are you doing this?" she whispered, tears filling her eyes. Michael smiled and nodded toward Cooper, who was sitting loyally beside the bars, tail wagging softly. "He won't let me give up," Michael said simply, and Anna knelt down and hugged Cooper, whispering thank you into his fur. That night, as the three of them sat in the living room, Anna brought out old photo albums, pictures of Michael hiking, running marathons, and smiling on mountain trails. For a moment, he felt a pang of sadness for what he'd lost, but then Cooper climbed onto the couch, rested his chin on Michael's lap, and it was like a silent reminder that the journey wasn't over. It was just different. A few days later, the physical therapist introduced a new challenge, walking short distances with lead braces and a support harness. It was daunting. Michael felt fear grip him, but when he looked down, Cooper was already there, harness on, ready to act as a mobility dog. They started slowly, one shuffle forward, then another, Michael leaning heavily on the bars and the harness. Cooper walked carefully at his side, matching his pace perfectly, occasionally glancing up as if to check, "You okay?" That first attempt was clumsy, exhausting, and Michael collapsed back into the chair after only 3 steps. But Cooper didn't act disappointed. He simply sat in front of him, tail wagging, licking his hand as if to say, 3 steps is still progress, and tomorrow we'll do 4. And they did. Within weeks, Michael went from 3 steps to 5, then 10. He began moving from the therapy bars to a walker, each session ending with Cooper guiding him back to his wheelchair like a proud assistant. The first time Michael managed to cross the living room with just the walker, Cooper barked loudly, spinning in a little happy circle like a puppy. That bark made Michael laugh so hard he cried, because it felt like a victory for both of them. Then came a moment that no one saw coming. One crisp autumn morning, Michael was sitting by the window, looking at the falling leaves, and Cooper walked over holding the leash in his mouth. Michael smiled weakly and said, "Buddy, I can't take you out today." But Cooper didn't budge. He nudged the leash against Michael's hand, then walked toward the door and looked back. Something in his eyes sparked a feeling Michael hadn't felt in months, a feeling of wanting to try. So he put on the lead braces, grabbed the walker, and stood up. His sister Anna was there visiting, and she gasped as he slowly shuffled toward the door. Cooper stayed right beside him, gently guiding him forward. They made it all the way to the front porch. Michael stood there, leaning on the walker, breathing hard but staring at the neighborhood he thought he'd never see standing up again. "We did it, Cooper," he whispered, voice breaking, and Cooper wagged his tail so hard it brushed the porch railing. The news of Michael standing outside spread through the street. Neighbors peeked out, some even clapped from their yards. It wasn't just about walking, it was about hope. After that day, Michael's confidence grew. He started walking small distances inside the house without the walker, just with the help of Cooper's harness. The bond between them deepened beyond what words could explain. It was like Cooper could read Michael's mind, knowing exactly when he needed a nudge of encouragement or when he needed to rest. The therapists began calling Cooper a miracle worker, but Michael always corrected them. "He's just my best friend who refuses to let me quit." A few weeks later, the doctor who had originally told Michael he'd never walk again came for a checkup. When she saw him take slow but steady steps across the living room with Cooper by his side, her jaw literally dropped. She knelt down to pet Cooper and said softly, "You did what medicine couldn't." That night, as Michael lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, he whispered, "You saved me, buddy." And Cooper climbed onto the bed, rested his head on Michael's chest, and let out a long, content sigh. That sound was more healing than any therapy session. Their journey wasn't over, but it was proof that when love is strong enough, it can rewrite even the darkest endings. The winter came quietly, soft snow blanketing the streets, and for the first time since the accident, Michael didn't dread the season. He woke up early each day, pulling himself to the edge of the bed, sliding on his lead braces, and smiling when Cooper trotted over holding the harness in his mouth, tail wagging like clockwork. Their routine was no longer just therapy, it was a way of living, and even the simplest things felt monumental now. By December, Michael could walk short distances inside the house without any support, just his hand lightly brushing along the wall for balance, and every time he made it from one room to the next. Cooper would bark once, sit, and look up as if to say, "I knew you could do it." But the biggest test came on Christmas Eve. The neighborhood invited Michael to the annual gathering at the community center, and though he hesitated, his sister Anna convinced him to go. "You've come so far, you need to show everyone what you and Cooper have done," she said, her eyes glistening with pride. So they went. As soon as they arrived, the entire room fell silent when they saw him step through the doors. Michael stood there, leaning slightly on the harness, but upright and smiling, and the crowd erupted in applause. Kids ran over to hug Cooper, neighbors wiped away tears, and someone even whispered, "It's like watching a miracle." They spent the evening surrounded by warmth and laughter. Michael moving slowly but freely, sharing stories of how Cooper pushed him to do what he thought was impossible. But that night wasn't just about celebration, it sparked something even bigger. A local journalist who attended the event decided to write about their journey, and within days their story spread online. Messages poured in from people across the country, some saying they were inspired to keep fighting after reading about Michael and Cooper. Others saying they adopted dogs because they saw how much love could heal. Then one email came from a rehabilitation center specializing in advanced mobility recovery. They had seen the story and offered Michael a place in their pilot program, one that paired cutting-edge therapy with service dogs like Cooper. It felt like the universe was opening another door. So a month later, Michael and Cooper started at the center. The training was grueling, pushing him harder than ever before, but now he wasn't just doing it to walk, he was doing it for the chance to inspire others like him. Cooper adapted to the program instantly, learning new commands to assist with balance, guiding Michael on obstacle courses, even alerting the therapists if Michael's legs began to tremble. Together they were unstoppable. By spring, something extraordinary happened. During a routine therapy session outdoors, Michael took his first completely unassisted steps on the grass. No walker, no harness, just his own strength. Everyone froze in shock, then burst into cheers. Michael looked down at Cooper, who wagged his tail so furiously it kicked up dirt, and he whispered, voice trembling, "We really did it." But the story didn't end there. Michael decided to dedicate his life to helping others like him. With Cooper by his side, he began visiting hospitals and rehab centers, speaking to patients who were where he once was, hopeless, lost, thinking they'd never get back up. He told them about the dark days, the endless frustration, and the small victories that slowly added up. But he always ended his talks with one message: sometimes hope has four legs, and doesn't he need words to tell you it's there? Cooper would quietly lay at his feet during every talk, and afterward, he'd go to each patient, gently resting his head on their laps, like he understood every bit of their pain. One day, after a visit, a little boy in a wheelchair looked up at Michael and said, I want a dog like Cooper so I can walk too. Michael knelt down beside him and smiled. You already have what it takes inside you, and the right friend will just help you see it. Months later, Michael did something he'd dreamed of since the accident. He went back to the hiking trail he used to run before everything changed. It wasn't easy. His legs still tired quickly, but he hiked slowly, step by step, with Cooper trotting at his side. When they reached the lookout point where he once stood as a runner, he now stood as a survivor. He looked over the valley, the same valley he thought he'd never see again from his own defeat, and whispered, "We made it." Cooper sat next to him, leaning his warm body against Michael's leg. And for a long moment they just stayed there, silent, taking it all in. That night, back home, as Michael sat in his living room surrounded by photos from their journey, he realized Cooper hadn't just helped him walk again, he helped him find purpose, resilience, and a new reason to live. He looked at Cooper lying peacefully on the rug and said softly, "You didn't just save my legs, you saved my life." Cooper opened one eye, wagged his tail, and with a soft sigh, drifted back to sleep. And in that quiet room, Michael understood that sometimes the greatest healers don't wear white coats or carry stethoscopes. Sometimes they're covered in fur, with a heart big enough to hold all the hope in the world.